He asked what I did for fun, and I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Not because I was nervous, though I was slightly, but because I genuinely couldn't think of anything. I scrolled through my brain looking for hobbies, interests, things I did regularly that weren't work or obligations, and came up empty. I said something vague about liking movies, which was true in the sense that I'd seen movies, but I couldn't name the last one I'd actually chosen to watch or cared about enough to remember. He moved on to another topic, but I stayed stuck on that question for the rest of the dinner. What did I do for fun? Who was I when I wasn't performing a role or meeting someone else's expectations or trying to be whatever version of myself seemed most likely to be accepted? I didn't know. I'd spent so long shaping myself around other people that I'd never developed a clear sense of what I actually liked or wanted independent of external input. The relationship I'd just gotten out of had reinforced this pattern without either of us realizing it. I'd check in before making plans to see if he wanted to do something together. I'd ask his opinion on what to wear, what to order, what movie to watch. Not because I valued his taste particularly, but because having someone else decide felt easier than accessing my own preferences. I didn't trust my own judgment, so I borrowed his. And over time, I stopped even trying to figure out what I thought about things. When he was in a good mood, I was in a good mood. When he seemed distant, I'd spend hours analyzing what I might have done wrong, adjusting my behavior, trying to get back to the version of me he seemed to like best. My internal state was entirely dependent on his external feedback, and I didn't see this as a problem because it felt like caring, like being connected, like what relationships were supposed to look like. After it ended, I had all this time and space that used to be filled with him, or thoughts about him, or plans involving him, and I didn't know what to do with any of it. I'd sit in my apartment scrolling through my phone for hours because I couldn't think of anything else to do. I'd make plans with people just to avoid being alone, not because I actually wanted to see them, but because the alternative was sitting with myself, and I had no idea how to do that. I started walking because it was free and it got me out of the apartment, and it didn't require making any decisions beyond putting on shoes and leaving. The first few times I brought my headphones, filled the silence with podcasts or music, anything to avoid being alone with my thoughts, but one day I forgot them and I just walked without any audio input, and it was uncomfortable in a way I hadn't expected. My mind was loud when there was nothing covering it. Thoughts I'd been avoiding surfaced, realizations about the relationship, about my patterns, about how little I actually knew myself. I wanted to go back and get my headphones, but I kept walking instead. And by the end, I felt slightly more settled, like something had shifted just from allowing my own thoughts to exist without immediately distracting from them. I kept doing it. Not every day, but most days, just walking with no destination and no audio and no agenda beyond moving and thinking. The thoughts started to organize themselves. I'd work through decisions that had been sitting unresolved because I'd been waiting for someone else's input to know what I wanted. I'd notice things about the neighborhood I'd lived in for years, but never actually seen because I'd always been distracted. These walks became the only time I felt like I was making decisions that were fully mine. No one knew where I was going or when I'd be back. No one was influencing what I thought about or how I processed it. It was just me and my mind. And gradually, that started to feel less threatening and more like a resource I'd been ignoring. Somewhere in those walks, I had this thought that I wanted to become the person I'd most want to spend time with. Not in an aspirational way, not some future ideal version, but practically. If I had to be stuck with myself, which I did, I wanted to actually like the person I was stuck with. That meant figuring out what kind of person that was, which I didn't know yet. I started paying attention to small things. I didn't like how I felt when I scrolled social media for hours, so I deleted the apps for a while. I noticed I felt better when I went to bed at a consistent time, so I started doing that even when I didn't feel like it.
I realized I was saying yes to things I didn't want to do out of habit or obligation, so I started saying no more often and sitting with the discomfort of potentially disappointing people. These weren't big transformations, just small adjustments based on what made me feel more like myself, or at least less like I was constantly performing for an invisible audience. But they started to accumulate into something that felt like having a relationship with myself that wasn't based on criticism or avoidance. The hobby question kept coming back though. I still didn't have a good answer. I'd spent years consuming other people's interests, going along with whatever my partner or my friends wanted to do, never developing anything that was distinctly mine. I didn't know what I liked because I'd never given myself permission to find out. I picked up a book, not because I particularly wanted to read, but because it seemed like something people with interests did. The first one was boring, and I quit halfway through. The second one I finished, but didn't enjoy. The third one I actually got into, stayed up late reading, thought about for days after. I didn't become a reader overnight, but I started to develop opinions about what I liked and didn't like, what genres worked for me, what authors I wanted to read more of. It was the same with other things. I tried cooking and was bad at it, but kept trying because being competent at something I'd previously avoided felt satisfying. I started taking photos on my walks, not for social media, but just to have them, and gradually developed an eye for what I thought looked interesting. None of these became defining hobbies, but they were mine, chosen deliberately rather than absorbed passively from whoever I was around. The competence piece mattered more than I expected. I'd spent so long feeling like I was bad at being a person, like I needed someone else to validate my choices or capabilities. But when I taught myself to do small things independently, when I figured out solutions to problems without immediately asking for help, it created this baseline of trust in myself that hadn't been there before. I learned to dye my own eyebrows because I was tired of paying someone else to do it, and tired of my appearance being contingent on having money or time for appointments. The first attempt looked terrible. The second was slightly better. By the fifth time, I had it down, and it felt like a small victory. This thing I could do for myself that didn't require anyone else's skill or approval. That sounds trivial, but it wasn't. It was evidence that I could learn things, that I could take care of myself in ways I'd been outsourcing, that I had more capability than I'd been giving myself credit for. And that evidence started to change how I approached other areas where I'd been defaulting to helplessness or dependence. My friendships started to feel inadequate in a way they hadn't before. Not because the people were wrong, but because the connections were surface level, based on proximity or history, rather than actual alignment. We'd talk about the same things every time, surface complaints and updates, nothing that felt substantial or real. I started being more selective about who I spent time with and what kind of conversations I was willing to have. If someone only wanted to gossip or complain, I'd find a reason to cut the interaction short. If someone seemed open to deeper conversation, I'd push slightly past the surface level and see if they'd meet me there.
I also started doing this thing where I'd add one more sentence than felt comfortable in casual interactions. With the barista, with the person at the gym, with acquaintances I'd normally just exchange pleasantries with. Not forced conversation, just slightly more engagement than the minimum. Sometimes it went nowhere, but sometimes it opened into actual connection, into discovering shared interests or perspectives that wouldn't have emerged from just the scripted exchange. This made social situations less predictable and slightly more uncomfortable because I was engaging genuinely rather than running on autopilot, but it also made them more interesting.
I met people I actually wanted to talk to, rather than just people who happened to be around. I had conversations that stayed with me, rather than just filling time. I was also learning to be alone without it feeling like punishment. Before, being alone meant something was wrong, meant I'd been rejected or wasn't interesting enough to have plans. Now it just meant I was alone, which was neutral. I could enjoy my own company without needing it to be validated by someone else wanting it too. The walks continued, the reading continued, the small practices of taking care of myself and making decisions and developing opinions, those continued too. I still didn't have a great answer to the hobby question, but I had things I did regularly that I chose because I wanted to do them, not because they made me look a certain way or because someone else suggested them. I went on another date months later, and when he asked what I did for fun, I had actual answers. I told him about the books I'd been reading, about the walks I took, about learning to develop film from a camera I'd bought used. He seemed interested, but more importantly, I didn't need him to be interested. I wasn't performing or trying to be impressive. I was just sharing things that were actually part of my life. The difference between that conversation and the previous one wasn't that I'd become a more interesting person in some objective sense. It was that I'd started building a life that felt like mine, that I'd chosen piece by piece rather than inheriting from whoever I was trying to please or be close to. I still catch myself defaulting to old patterns sometimes, checking to see what someone else thinks before I know what I think, adjusting my behavior to avoid potential disapproval, filling silence with distraction rather than sitting in it. But I notice it now, and I can choose differently, can interrupt the pattern before it runs all the way through. The work of becoming someone I actually like spending time with, that's ongoing. There's no end point where I'll have it figured out completely, but I'm further along than I was, less dependent on external validation, more capable of sitting with myself without needing to escape or numb out or find someone else to tell me who I should be. The version of myself I'm building isn't dramatic or particularly impressive from the outside. It's just someone who has interests and opinions and the ability to be alone without falling apart. Someone who makes decisions based on internal alignment rather than external approval. Someone who's learning, slowly, that being known by herself matters more than being validated by anyone else.